mounting the hinges is a pretty simple process. I'm making sure that I have the hinge side where I stamped, and then I've set the height where my hinges are going to go at 2.5 inches. So I set my combination square to that, line the hinge up with that, and then I'm using a Vicks bit here, and this is a 5/64. That will match that screw nicely, and the Vicks bit is nice because it self-centers in the holes, and then drill all 3 of those, and then just drive our screws in. Set your clutch real low for this. I have mine on at 2. Because you don't want that wood to tear out. And that's it. So that will open and then snap closed. So I will go about putting the remaining hinges on here, the other 7 hinges, and then we'll mount them to the doors or to the cabinet. To align the doors, I have made a mark 1/2 inch down to align the bottom of the door with the face frame. And then on the hinge side, I made a mark 5/16 out. So I will use those as I pull the door down, use those to align it. And then one thing that's important here is as I align this line, the hinge itself, once you push down a little bit, because it has a little spring for the self-closing hinges, when you push it down, it's going to move in probably about 3/32 of an inch. So you want to move this back a little bit past that line, and then when you push down, it will align right to your line. And then we'll do the front, we'll do the bottom and the top, and then I'll just drill down through here with that Vicks bit. And the screws that they give you for this, they're a little bit different. They're a little bit longer as well, because there's only 2 of them instead of 3. So we'll screw those down into the face frame. So this is a 1/4 inch right here, and the top, the overlap will be a 1/4 inch in the bottom. On the top it'll be about maybe a 1/2 inch or 3/8 of an inch. I like to leave a little bit less at the bottom because people usually look down at furniture and then it evens out the proportions of that. Kind of like if you ever study your history of ancient architecture, the Parthenon in Rome, not the Pantheon in Greece, the Parthenon. One of the massive domes, or the main massive dome in there, the architect built all the little frames inside into it so that when you stand right in the middle, they all look like they're evenly spaced. So go do a DuckDuckGo search on that, the Pantheon and the inside of that if you want to. Anyway, I digress there. So back to this, I'm going to mount all the doors and then we'll take a look at it. To make sure that all the pulls are at the exact same height, the level on the doors, instead of measuring down from the top of the door consistently across here, what I'm doing instead is measuring from the underside of the top right here down. And in this case my measurement is 8 5/8. And then I'm measuring here down from the top here 8 5/8. And then I'm going to put my straight edge, the ruler, on these 2 marks. And then I will mark the handle here and the handle here. If there were more, I'd use a longer stick if there were more doors, but this way they're all level. Even if the doors, when they're mounted, if they're off a 32nd or so, they all sit level with the top, the handles do. I do double check and measure down from here, they're very, very close, just to make sure that it looks nice and level. To mount the poles, I first measured, I first got this measurement, and then I measured down exactly 3 inches. And before I drill, I'm going to use my scratch awl here to put a little punch in there. If at all possible, try to stay away from the hard grain and the soft grain where they meet. This is almost in all the soft grain, and this is in all the soft grain. You can't always do it, but it's guaranteed if you start drilling down through where there's hard and soft grain, it's going to deviate and move into the soft grain. So what I'm going to do is, to get a clean drill on the bottom, a clean hole, I'll put a piece of scrap wood underneath this, and then just drill straight through. I'm using an 11/64 bit. Even that's traveling a little bit. Alright, and then the pole takes these 2 screws here. So push them up through here, and then that's where the handle will sit. And I'll snug those up with a screwdriver, but that's how it will look. So I'll do the other 4 of these, and then we'll take a look at it. I'm doing a little test here in a piece of this 3/16 inch plywood, just to see if I can carve this little triple leaf pattern without going too deep or without cutting all the way through. Also, maybe just to see how it's going to look in here too. There's 3 layers in this plywood. Well, technically 5, but there's 3 layers on the inside, and then a couple of really, really nice pieces of finished grade sanded stuff on the outside. I think this is going to be okay. So it doesn't go all the way through, and it looks like it allows me to carve the way I want to in here. I outlined it first, and I'm just going around the outlines with a V chisel. This is kind of my preferred method. Outline it first and then take a swipe out of the middle and then ease up at the end. These really won't be highlighted or anything, painted a different color. I will just put them in here and then paint over them with the final color, which will be that robin's egg blue, and they'll just have a little bit of a shadow line to them to make them kind of subtle. If you've seen the chair, the painted Morris chair that I did, that's what I did on the sides of those, on the slats on the side. So I think this is going okay. So I'll finish this up just to finish the test and make sure I didn't go through the back. And then I'll carve this into each door. So I'm just finishing up the last little 3-leaf pattern on the doors. Just take your time, go slow. Make sure they look good. A super sharp chisel really helps too. If you're nervous about spending all the time making these 4 doors and then carving in them, a good remedy for that is don't be so nervous. Of course I'm kidding here, but just dive right in and do it. Be confident. Okay, so I have all the doors carved. I'm going to stand this thing up and we'll take a look at it in its raw stage. Okay, here it is. So all the doors are on here, everything is carved, and I have the shelves out and still have to put a plywood back on it. But the self-closing hinges work well. They will, right here, kind of take over and close the doors for you, keep them closed. And I will put rubber bumpers on there, or the plastic, I guess they're like neoprene or something like that. I guess probably not neoprene, vinyl or something. So they're little bumpers that will stick on there to dull that when they close. So pretty happy with it. I do like the look of raw wood, but I really want to paint it, and I think that's my intention all along. So I'll take all the hardware off and hang the doors up. I put a little eyelet in the bottom, just drill a hole up through the bottom here, hang them upside down, and hang them from the ceiling, and I can paint all the way around. So a couple coats of that robin's egg blue, here's the sample, and then we'll do some distressing, and then a couple coats of the polycrylic, and we'll wrap this up. I'm not as good at cutting with my left hand on the end there and trying to hold it with my right. So I'm ripping or cutting up the back panels out of this 3/16 inch plywood. So I have another cut to make here, and then we will put these on. There is definitely a sweet spot when you are cutting this plywood to get it to not vibrate. If you're up here where you normally are at maybe 45-degree angle, it'll vibrate like that. As you turn it down, even though you're going to cut a little more wood, it tends to cut faster and it doesn't vibrate, therefore being pretty smooth. To secure the back, I'm going to use these 3/4 inch nails, and I'll just put them along the top and the bottom, and then just where we have the stiles going through. So not too many. I've marked on here too where my rail along the back goes, so I'll keep them about right in the middle here. I'll just put one about every 10 inches and that will secure the back on there. You see on the back where the back panel goes, this is why we put the rails on the back. This is the lower rail, but all the rails in the back. This is why we inset them 1/4 inch from the side, so that this 3/16 inch plywood would just sit in there, and you'd still have about a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch left over here. So it nestles down in there, and then your back is nice and flat. Alright, have the paint all mixed up and ready to go here. So we'll just start putting our first coat on here. I have a decent angled brush. This is a 2-inch brush. Works pretty well. And we will put one nice and even thin coat on here. Let that dry for about 4 hours or overnight. And then we'll come back and put a second coat on it. This is a satin paint, and it's just a basic interior grade satin paint for like painting your house. So it works pretty well. Try and brush everything out with the grain as best you can once you get it on there. And I'll keep doing this and coat the entire outside. I'll do the back as well in this same color, and want it to look nice from the back if you ever see it or move it. Some of you might not want to do that, but that's okay. It's your preference. And then I had thought about leaving the inside just a natural wood color, but I think I'm going to change my mind, and I think I want that to be white. So I'm going to go through those steps, which I know it's a little bit extra work, but it'll be worth it in the end, I think, to open it up, and it'll have a nice contrast between this kind of robin's egg blue here and the white interior. Keep it kind of clean looking too. Alright, so I will keep working on this and show you when I get those coats done. After we do both of these coats, we'll let that dry overnight, and then we'll come back and we will make it look a little bit weathered and worn and distressed with a file and a little bit of sandpaper. To distress this, I guess first I want to point out that even though, I use a lot of hand tools on here, you still want to make sure that everything looks really, really good. And this is after 2 coats of paint. So everything is nice and flat, fits together well, nice and smooth. And then you can go ahead and distress it and do all the other things to it. But just don't cut corners thinking that your paint's going to cover something up, or if you have a gap here and there, it's going to be suddenly fixed by your distressing. It'll just look still unprofessional. So I'm going to take, this is just a piece of steel cable with a bunch of different washers and other things I have laying around the shop, and just a few strikes. And that should really do it. I really like to hit the corners with this little double piece here, because then when I sand it with the final sanding, it leaves the paint in there and looks pretty cool. So normally I will do this distressing before I paint it, but this time around I had so much going on in life and whatever, I just completely forgot to do it. So what I'm going to do is I have 2 coats of paint here, and the distressing tool does leave some marks on here from the metal, some black marks. So I'm going to put a 3rd coat of paint on here. Usually I'll only do 2 coats. So I'll put a 3rd coat on to clean everything up, fill in some of these little distressing marks just a little bit with more paint. Then I'll come back and sand everything, and then put a couple of coats of the polyacrylic on there, or water-based polyurethane. Okay. I'm just finishing up taking some of the paint off the corners here, just to distress it a little bit and give it a little bit of a worn look. So I have this file that I use, pretty good size file, and just gently take it along the edges, and here I'll use some real coarse 60 grit sandpaper just to give it a natural look. Looks like on the edges where it might be rubbed across here, rubbed here. I don't do too much. I don't want it to look like really, really distressed, but but I like this look, and my wife likes that look too. So gives it a nice clean look. I've already texturized this and distressed it by hitting it with some various pieces like I showed you before. So I'll do this distressing to the doors, and then that's really about it for this. Once I'm done with it, I'll put 2 coats of water-based polyurethane or polycrylic on there and mount all the hardware, mount the doors, and we'll show you the final piece. I guess one thing I wanted to say is I will usually use the file to take a large majority of the paint off and get down to the bare wood. I really like to see the bare wood, but then I'll use the 60 grit sandpaper to go over that, because sometimes the file leaves the paint a little bit coarse, so I'll still smooth it out with sandpaper after that. I'm going to put the final finish on with polycrylic, and I would normally use a brush, but I've found that when I use a brush on the furniture, sometimes it leaves tiny little like micro air bubbles. So I read on several forums online to try a painting pad. So I bought this, and it's about $10, and surprisingly it works really, really well. It goes much faster. 3 swipes across the top of this cabinet, and 1 coat is applied. So I just put it into a paint roller pan like this and dip it in here and just kind of roll it off. It's going to form bubbles in here when you kind of strike it off like that, but I found that it works just fine and doesn't leave any streaks if you use it on its face like this when you drag it down. So once I strike it off, and just take it here, put it in, and just push and pull. Push and pull. Then I'll reverse it. Pull up from the bottom. And I try to keep it as much as I can just really nice and flat, and do one final little drag. And it works really well. This I will just use the edge of it to do the insides here, and then just on the flat, on the outsides, drag it across here, drag it across the bottom like this. And I'm pretty impressed with this so far. So I'm putting my second coat on here right now, and I will show you the final piece once I put the shelves in and the hardware. Okay, here's the final piece, and I like how it turned out. It has 2 coats of paint, and then it's distressed, and then 2 coats of polycrylic. And the inside, what I did was I decided to leave the wood natural. I like that because when I sanded down through the paint, you can see the pine through here, and I really liked kind of that amber color of the pine. So what I did was I just put a coat of polycrylic on the shelves, and that kind of brought out that amber color as well, so that it matches. I also made sure that I put polycrylic on the inside here too, underneath the top, so that that would accept moisture evenly and also protect itself from moisture as well, so that it wouldn't buckle. So that is it. Really like how it turned out. Should be a lot of nice storage for us. This is going to go into our dining room. So it'll be kind of like a sideboard, kind of like a buffet, kind of like a, I guess what they're calling it these days is an accent cabinet. So that's it. That is the final piece. Overall, it's a 6 foot by 30 inches by 16 deep. So it should give us a lot of nice, many years of service. Okay, I'll also put a few close-up pictures of the distressing and stuff on it. I'll take some pictures of that and show you some close-up work. All right, thank you. Hope you enjoyed this project.